Entering the doors of a hospital too early for a mammogram.
Virtually all dogs who come in contact with the canine flu will contract it. When teenagers finally exit the doors of high school,
They'll be doing live demonstrations. Back to you, Catherine. Where they receive about 19 vaccinations by the time they're 18 months old. Local veterinarians say the virus broke about 3 years ago and has been slowly spreading ever since. There aren't any cases officially documented in Utah yet, but the Center for Disease Control has reported cases in our neighbor to the east, Colorado. Alpine animal veterinarian Dr. Vaughn Park says that even though he hasn't diagnosed any dogs with the dangerous flu, he has definitely cared for dogs with the symptoms.
Unfortunately, we don't do a lot of diagnostic virus isolation and things like that when we see upper respiratory diseases. And so I may have seen some cases, but I've certainly seen dogs with those symptoms. But there are a number of other organisms, bacteria, and viruses that cause the same symptoms.
Symptoms of H3N8 are coughing, sneezing, fever, and runny eyes and nose. Like the human flu virus, the dog version also has a vaccine available. Dr. Park says the vaccine creates antibodies in the dog that fight the virus.
If they get exposed, they can still break with symptoms, but because they've got antibodies in their body, they will fight off the virus and get over it faster.
Virtually all dogs who come in contact with the canine flu will contract it, and in about 1 in 10 dogs, it's fatal.
HN3A is spread mainly from dog to dog, but can live on other surfaces like dog dishes and people's hands for up to 24 hours. Dr. Park suggests keeping your dog away from large groups of dogs, especially those with a cough. Brenna Olson, BYU Daily News, Provo. Ongoing controversy over the risk of vaccinations seems to be a never-ending battle of opinion, but most doctors agree that vaccinations are one of the most important things a parent can do for their kids.
Probably the best thing that we can offer our children, besides clean water and good, clean food, is immunizations.
The regular vaccine schedule for babies includes some injections for rare diseases that seem to have died out decades ago. Diseases like polio and measles. This leaves some wondering why the vaccines are even necessary. But Dr. Bartholomew says the rare diseases are reappearing.
Last year there was an outbreak of measles in 15 states.
For Heather Shelley and her kids, though, vaccines seem to do more harm than help.
I went, why didn't anyone tell me these things? No one, all they said is he'll get a fever and a sore arm.
She is referring to her then 2-month-old and 18-month-old sons. Shelley took them in for their regular vaccinations at the same time, and soon they both showed odd reactions. Shelley made a couple of different calls to our pediatrician's hotline, and she says that every time she called, she was surprised by their #1 concern.
Like the first thing out of their mouths was, when did he get his immunizations? And I thought, that is really odd.
This incident led Shelley to research more about vaccinations. She has since decided not to get them anymore, but says vaccination should be an informed, personal choice because they are not always harmful. Dr. Bartholomew says the 19 vaccinations kids receive by the time they're 18 months old help save lives, and the risk of vaccines is very small compared to the benefit.
We're talking like 1 in a million for serious complications.
BYU Daily News reporter Brenna Olson is here to help clear things up. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services says that going to the hospital too early for a mammogram can cause unnecessary fear and anxiety. But those who have had the disease say early screening is critical. The chilling feeling that comes after a positive mammogram screening is all too real for Kelly Taylor. So the new changes to the breast cancer screening guidelines shock her.
See, I think that's nuts.
The Department of Health and Human Services now recommends that women not get a mammogram screening until age 50. For Kelly Taylor, waiting that long may have been too late. She was only 39 when she found out she had breast cancer.
If I had found it a little earlier, I wouldn't have had to have chemo and radiation.
Because her cancer was caught in time, Kelly is now healthy and in remission. Other changes in the new guidelines are that mammogram screening should only take place every other year, and doctors don't need to teach women to do self-breast exams. Kelly disagrees. Just months before her first scheduled mammogram, she found a lump on her own with a self-exam.
So I was doing them on a regular basis, so I knew when it wasn't there and when it was there. And it kind of helped them figure out how fast it was growing and make some initial decisions and stuff like that.
Some hospitals are still pushing the previous guidelines and are reminding patients that the American Cancer Society is not changing their stance.
Screening mammography beginning at age 40 have resulted in a reduction of 30% in mortality since 1990. Those statistics are difficult to ignore because they help save lives.
The Department of Health and Human Services says that new guidelines don't supersede your doctor's advice, especially for those with higher risk for breast cancer. Back to you.
Fall is well underway and winter is close on its tail, so kickstarting the furnace is on many homeowners' to-do list. But just lighting the pilot light or flipping a switch may not be the first step to a safe winter.
You need to make sure that the vents are clear, that there's no debris in there that is combustible, because it does heat up in there. Other things people don't think about, the furnace room, a lot of times people use it as a storage room, which it's not meant for.
Extra air filters like this one are often kept right next to the furnace, which can create a dangerous fire hazard. All items here in the utility room should be kept at least 3 feet away from the furnace.
Those who work with furnaces daily say simple safety precautions before turning on the furnace do not take the place of a yearly tune-up. Not only will a tune-up keep the furnace properly maintained, but it can also detect any problems.
There's places in that furnace where they can develop cracks, and as that air comes on, it can pull those fumes out into the main airstream, and that's where people generally get sick from carbon monoxide.
Snow says that feeling flu-like symptoms only in the home is a sign of carbon monoxide being released. If a furnace is no longer safe, 'tis the season to consider upgrading.
Yeah, it was broken, and so just before it got cold, the time of the year, I had to get it fixed.
Snow says that a furnace should generally last about 18 years. He says that the most important thing a homeowner can do on their own is change the air filter. So check that filter every few months and prepare for a warm, cozy, and safe winter. Brenna Olson, BYU Daily News, Orem.